The alien woman walked in holding my diary and said, "So you find me sexy, human?" Owen had just convinced himself that the atmospheric sensor wasn't actually broken, merely having what he generously termed an existential crisis about oxygen ratios. When his cabin door hissed open without the courtesy of a warning chime, he looked up from the tangle of wires in his lap, already forming an excuse about why he hadn't filed the maintenance report yet, and felt his entire cardiovascular system attempt an emergency shutdown. Naomi stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor's pale blue bioluminescent strips, holding his diary. Not a diary that looked like his diary. Not something that could possibly be mistaken for his diary. His actual, specific, deeply incriminating diary, with the coffee stain on the cover from that morning 3 weeks ago, when she laughed at his joke about the ship's AI having passive-aggressive tendencies. "So," she said, her voice carrying that melodic quality that had, embarrassingly, featured in several of those diary entries, "you find me sexy, human." It wasn't a question. Owen's brain, usually reliable for calculating orbital trajectories and remembering obscure facts about stellar formation, produced only static. His mouth opened. Nothing emerged except a sound like air escaping from a failing valve seal. Naomi stepped inside, and the door slid shut behind her with a soft pneumatic sigh that sounded to Owen's panicking mind distinctly judgmental. Her skin was deeper violet than usual. He'd learned to read her color shifts over the past 6 months, though he'd been careful not to stare, or at least he'd thought he'd been careful, which meant she was either amused or annoyed, possibly both. Her long ears, elegantly tapered and far more expressive than human features, angled forward with what he desperately hoped was curiosity rather than predatory intent. "I can explain," Owen managed, which was a spectacular lie because he absolutely could not explain. There was no explaining why he'd written 4 pages about the way her eyes phosphoresced faintly when she concentrated on complex navigation calculations, or the frankly excessive paragraph about how she ate synthetic strawberries. "Please do," Naomi said, flipping open the diary with her thumb. Her fingers were longer than human proportions, more elegant, and he'd definitely written about those too. "I'm particularly interested in your explanation for..." "Let me find it. Ah, yes. The way she moves through zero gravity has the mathematical perfection of a Fibonacci spiral made flesh." Owen wondered if it was possible to die of mortification in space, and whether that would constitute a workers' compensation claim. "That's taken out of context." "What context makes that less about you watching me float down corridors?" "Scientific observation?" Her left ear twitched. He'd documented that tell extensively. It meant she was trying not to smile. He was either about to be forgiven or launched out an airlock, and the uncertainty was causing his hands to sweat inside his work gloves. Naomi moved closer, her bare feet silent on the metal decking. The Vela didn't wear shoes aboard ship, something about maintaining contact with the vessel's electromagnetic field for navigation purposes. Owen had tried very hard not to find that detail enchanting. He'd failed, as evidenced by the diary currently being used as evidence against him. "Naomi, look, I know this is..." He gestured vaguely at the space between them, the diary, the entire mortifying situation. "A massive violation of professional boundaries, and probably several articles of the Interspecies Cooperation Treaty. But I swear I never meant for you to..." "How did you even get that?" "Your quarters aren't exactly Fort Knox, Owen. The door code is your birthday backwards. I needed to borrow your calibration wrench." She held up the diary. "I found this instead." "And you read it?" "I read the first page by accident. Your handwriting is terrible, by the way. Very human." Her eyes, amber with those unsettling flecks of gold that seemed to shift in different light, fixed on him. "After that, I read it on purpose." The cabin felt approximately 70% smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. Owen could smell the faint ozone scent that clung to Naomi after her shifts in the engine room, could see the bioluminescent freckles across her collarbones that he'd mentioned in what he now realized was mortifying detail on page 17. "For what it's worth," he tried, "I also wrote extensively about my concerns regarding the starboard coolant leak and the questionable structural integrity of Cargo Bay 3. It's not entirely about you." "Page 62, Naomi said, not looking at the diary. You compared my voice to solar wind through ionized gas. Page 48, you spent 3 paragraphs on my hands. Page 19, okay, yes, point taken. It's significantly about you. Owen ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that he immediately regretted because she'd probably written that down somewhere too. No, wait, she was the one with his diary, not the other way around. His thoughts were spiraling. Look, I kept it private for a reason. I wasn't going to act on any of this. We have 3 more months on this mission. We're professionals, and I'm well aware that interspecies relationships are complicated. Why didn't you tell me? The question landed like a micrometeorite strike, unexpected and jarring. Naomi's voice had gone quieter, less teasing. She set the diary down on his desk with careful precision, her fingers lingering on the cover. Tell you what exactly? Hey, Naomi, I know we're supposed to be mapping resource-rich asteroids in the Helix Nebula, but I've developed an entirely inappropriate fixation on the way you close your eyes when you taste something sweet. That seemed like a poor conversational opener. Better than me finding out by reading about it. She had a point. Owen's brain finally lurched back into partial functionality. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make things weird. Weirder. More weird than they apparently already were, given that I was writing diary entries like a teenager with a crush. He paused, which in my defense is exactly what this situation has revealed me to be, emotionally speaking. Naomi's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing her features. You're not the only one who's been noticing things, human. Owen's heart, which had been attempting to vibrate through his ribcage, suddenly stopped entirely. I'm sorry, what? I've known for weeks, the way you volunteer for repairs that don't need 2 people. How you always bring me coffee during gamma shift. Your truly terrible excuses to start conversations. Her ears tilted forward, a gesture he'd learned meant focus, attention. I thought I was imagining the interest. You weren't imagining it, Owen admitted, because apparently this conversation had already demolished every professional boundary he'd ever attempted to maintain. But I figured, different species, different customs, 3 months left in a confined space. Recipe for disaster. Probably, Naomi agreed. She stepped closer again, near enough that he could see these subtle lavender undertones in her skin, the way her color shifted with her mood like a visible emotion. But you wrote about me anyway. I wrote about a lot of things. Coping mechanism. You wrote 4 pages about my laugh, Owen. He had no defense for that. It was true. Her laugh did sound like solar wind through ionized gas, or at least what he imagined that would sound like, and he'd gotten poetic about it in ways that now made him want to open the airlock and walk out into vacuum. Naomi picked up the diary again, flipped to a page she'd apparently marked. This part, where you described teaching me about Earth coffee traditions, and I told you about Vela meditation tea. You wrote that it felt like the first conversation where the universe wasn't pressing down quite so hard. Owen remembered that night. Gamma shift, just the 2 of them awake while the rest of the skeleton crew slept. The observation deck, stars wheeling past. Her patient explanation of how her people experienced time differently. His clumsy attempt to explain why humans needed caffeine to function. The moment when talking stopped feeling like translation and started feeling like connection. Yeah, he said quietly. I remember. So do I. Naomi's voice had gone soft, almost hesitant. I kept my distance after that, told myself it was protocol, professionalism, safer for both of us. What changed? She held up the diary, smiled, a real smile this time, not the professional courtesy she usually offered. I read about myself through your eyes. Couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. Outside the viewport, a rust-colored asteroid tumbled past in the eternal darkness, indifferent to the sudden shift in atmosphere inside the tiny cabin. Owen swallowed hard, tried to find words that wouldn't sound completely ridiculous. For the record, he managed, I'm absolutely terrible at this. Romance, I mean. There's a reason I became an astrophysicist, significantly better with orbital mechanics than emotional ones. Naomi laughed then, that sound he'd failed to adequately capture in writing, and Owen realized his heart was going to survive this after all. Her hand reached out, hovering just above his arm, not quite touching, waiting. Good thing I'm an excellent navigator, she said. We'll figure it out. Owen's hand finally moved to meet Naomi's hovering fingers, and the contact sent a small static shock between them. Something about the bioelectric field the Vela generated, which he'd read about in the cultural briefings, but experiencing firsthand was entirely different. She didn't pull away, just raise an eyebrow in that way that made his stomach do complicated things. Your species is very electrically inefficient, she observed, her thumb tracing a light circle on his wrist. All that energy loss. It's a wonder you don't just short out. We do, actually. We call it cardiac arrest. Owen was aware he was babbling, but couldn't quite stop himself. Also feelings, apparently. Those short us out, too. Naomi's ears tilted in what he'd learned was amusement. Is that what's happening now? A feelings-based electrical failure? Comprehensive systems collapse, yeah. She laughed, and the sound loosened something in his chest that had been wound tight since she'd walked in, holding evidence of his catastrophic lack of emotional poker face. Her hand slid down to lace her fingers with his. Longer fingers, cool skin, that persistent tingle of her bioelectric field making his nerves sing. So, she said, settling onto the edge of his bunk with unsettling casualness, like she hadn't just detonated his entire professional composure. Tell me about the strawberry thing. Owen's face went supernova hot. Absolutely not. Page 23, very detailed. Surprisingly poetic for a man who mostly writes equations. She was grinning now, clearly enjoying herself. Something about the sacred ritual of synthesized fruit and eyes closed like prayer. I hate you. You wrote 17 pages suggesting otherwise. 17? I thought it was 4. 4 about your laugh. 17 total. I counted. Owen sat down heavily in his desk chair, which creaked in protest. Everything on the parallax creaked. The ship was 40 years old and held together mostly through spite and creative maintenance. Though in my defense, we've been alone on this vessel for 6 months with nothing but asteroids and the occasional supply drone for company. The strawberry observation was during a particularly boring week. You wrote it the day after I shared my rations with you because you'd forgotten to log your meal request. He had forgotten. The ship's AI, which everyone had nicknamed Phyllis for reasons lost to time and crew turnover, had a vindictive streak when it came to missed meal logs. Naomi had slid half her dinner tray across the communal table without comment, and he'd been absurdly touched by the gesture. You remember that? I remember most things about you, Owen. I just didn't write them down. She tilted her head, ears shifting to catch some sound he couldn't hear. Probably the ship's electromagnetic fluctuations, which the Vela navigated by instinct. For instance, you always check the oxygen sensors twice, even though they've never failed. You tap your left foot when you're thinking. You hum old Earth songs when you think no one's listening. That's just... He stopped. Wait, what songs? 20th century. Very retro. Phyllis identified them for me. Apparently you have terrible taste in music. Phyllis is a judgmental piece of code with delusions of sentience. As if summoned, the ship's AI chimed in through the wall speaker. I resent that characterization, Dr. Owen. My sentient subroutines are fully licensed and certified. Naomi covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Owen glared at the speaker. Phyllis, aren't you supposed to respect privacy protocols in crew quarters? Privacy protocols are suspended during potential interpersonal conflict situations per Regulation 47 subsection B. I detected elevated heart rates and assumed intervention might be necessary. We're fine, Owen said through gritted teeth. Your cortisol levels suggest otherwise. Phyllis, Naomi interjected, her voice carrying that particular tone of command that made the AI immediately compliant. We're having a private conversation. Please resume standard protocols. Acknowledged Navigator Naomi. For what it's worth, I found Dr. Owen's diary entries quite touching. Very human. The speaker clicked off. Owen dropped his head into his hands. I'm going to reprogram her to only speak in binary. You've been threatening that for 3 months. This time I mean it. Naomi stood, moving to his small viewport, really just a reinforced porthole, but it offered a view of the asteroid field they'd been mapping, chunks of ice and mineral tumbling through the darkness like frozen thoughts. Her reflection in the glass showed her smiling. Your AI has a point, though. Very human. She turned to face him. My people have something similar. We call them soul marks, artistic representations of how we see potential partners. Owen looked up. Like portraits. More abstract. Songs, sometimes. Kinetic sculptures. I knew a Vela who encoded her feelings into a quantum algorithm. Her partner had to solve it to understand the depth of her attraction. Naomi's expression turned thoughtful. Your diary is probably the closest human equivalent I've encountered. Observation translated into language. Clumsy but sincere. Did you just call my heartfelt, emotional documentation clumsy? Yes, but sincerely clumsy. That's the important part. She moved back toward him, and Owen was struck again by how she moved. That zero-gravity grace, even under thrust, like she was dancing with forces he could only calculate. Among my people, when someone shares their soul mark, it's an invitation, a beginning. And if I'd known that before you found my diary, I might have had a panic attack and jettisoned it into space. Good thing I found it first. She reached down, took both his hands, pulled him to his feet. They were nearly the same height, her eyes level with his. The golden flecks in her amber irises seemed to shift like stars rearranging themselves into new constellations. So what do we do now, Owen? You've accidentally soul-marked me with your terrible handwriting and excessive detail about fruit consumption. I've read it and, against my better judgment, found it endearing. We could pretend this never happened? We could. Would you want that? The question hung in the recycled air between them. Outside, an asteroid rich in frozen methane caught the distant light of the nebula's core stars, glittering like scattered diamonds. Inside, Owen's carefully constructed professional boundaries were already debris. No, he admitted, I really wouldn't. Good, because I've spent 6 weeks trying to convince myself that maintaining distance was the smart choice, and reading about myself through your perspective thoroughly destroyed that argument. Her fingers tightened on his. Fair warning, I don't know how this works between our species. Vela courtship has rituals, stages, specific protocols. We're not spontaneous about this. And humans are chaotic disasters who write diary entries instead of actually talking about feelings. So we're both working with suboptimal approaches. Maybe we invent something new. Terrifying prospect. Absolutely. She smiled, and Owen thought that even if he lived to be 200, unlikely given humanity's current life expectancy and his own tendency toward dangerous maintenance procedures, he'd never adequately described that expression. But you wrote 17 pages about me, so I'm assuming you're not opposed to terror? When you put it that way, I sound unhinged. Little bit, yes. The ship hummed around them, life support cycling air, engines maintaining their programmed drift through the asteroid field, sensors collecting data on mineral compositions and ice density. The Parallax continued its mission, indifferent to the fact that something fundamental had shifted in the small cabin on Deck 3, where two people from different worlds were trying to figure out what came after accidental honesty. Owen squeezed her hands gently. For the record, I'm keeping the diary. Absolutely not. That's evidence. Of what? That you're hopelessly attracted to me and terrible at keeping secrets. I was doing fine until you broke into my quarters. Borrowed a wrench, found a confession. Naomi's ears tilted forward, mischievous. Consider it fate. Consider it breaking and entering. Your door code is your birthday backwards, Owen. That's not security, that's an invitation. He couldn't argue with that. Phyllis had been nagging him to change it for months. Instead, he pulled Naomi closer, her bioelectric field making his skin tingle, her warmth solid and real in the small space they shared. So we're doing this? He asked. Apparently, she said. Whatever this is. Outside, stars wheeled through the endless dark. Inside, they stayed like that. Not kissing, not yet, just existing in the same space without walls or pretense, while the parallax carried them forward into whatever came next. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged simultaneously, until Phyllis decided to ruin it with her characteristic timing. Navigator Naomi, Dr. Owen, I feel obligated to remind you that Regulation 14 requires documentation of any interpersonal relationship changes that might affect crew dynamics. Owen closed his eyes. Phyllis, I will physically disconnect your personality subroutines. That would violate your maintenance contract and possibly several AI rights statutes, but I appreciate the passion behind the threat. The AI somehow managed to sound smug despite being lines of code. Should I file the paperwork, or would you prefer to maintain the comfortable fiction that I don't monitor crew interactions? Naomi pulled back slightly, though her hand stayed in Owen's. You know what? File it. Mark it as status, figuring it out, and leave us alone. Acknowledged. I've also taken the liberty of adjusting your shift schedules to include overlapping meal periods. You're welcome. The speaker clicked off before either of them could respond. Owen stared at the wall. Did our ship's AI just play matchmaker? I think she's been playing matchmaker for weeks. The broken equipment that kept requiring both of us, the convenient scheduling conflicts that left us alone on gamma shift. Naomi's ears twitched with barely suppressed laughter. I thought I was imagining it. No, that tracks. Last month she claimed the waste recycler needed 2 people to repair. It's literally a one-person job. I thought she was just being inefficient. She was being a romantic. She's a starship management system with delusions of grandeur. She got results, though. Naomi released his hands and moved to examine his desk, which was covered in the usual chaos of his work. Tablets displaying mineral analysis, coffee cups in various stages of abandonment, and the atmospheric sensor he'd been theoretically fixing. She picked up the sensor, turned it over. This isn't broken. It's having an existential crisis. It's working perfectly. You were hiding in here. Owen had the grace to look embarrassed. Maybe slightly hiding. From me? From the overwhelming certainty that I was developing entirely inappropriate feelings for my colleague, and the equally overwhelming certainty that I was going to accidentally reveal said feelings by doing something catastrophically stupid, like writing them in a diary that I left lying around where anyone could find them. He paused. Which is exactly what happened. So my fears were well-founded. Naomi set down the sensor and turned to face him, leaning against the desk with her arms crossed. The position made her look relaxed, confident, and Owen was suddenly aware that while he'd been spiraling in private anxiety, she'd been dealing with the same situation with significantly more grace. How long did you know? He asked. That I was interested, I mean. Week 7. You brought me coffee with synthetic cinnamon, which isn't available in the standard rations. You'd traded 2 weeks of desserts to get it because I mentioned once that I missed the smell. He had done that, spent 3 days negotiating with the supply officer, who drove a hard bargain and had no sympathy for romantic gestures. That was just thoughtful, kind, exactly the sort of thing someone does when they're interested. Naomi's expression softened. I appreciated it. I also panicked and spent the next month being professionally distant because I didn't know what to do with appreciation. So we've both been disasters about this. Comprehensive disasters, yes. The ship shuddered slightly, a normal occurrence when passing through areas of higher particle density, but it still made Owen's engineer instincts activate. He glanced at the wall panel showing structural integrity. All green. Naomi didn't even look, just kept her eyes on him with that unnerving focus. You really trust the ship that much? He asked. I trust the electromagnetic signature. I can feel when something's wrong before the sensors register it. She tapped her temple. Vela neurology. We're wired into magnetic fields the way you're wired into visual processing. That's actually fascinating. Is that why you never wear shoes? The direct contact helps? Partly. Also, your human boots are uncomfortable. Too rigid. She flexed her toes against the deck plating. Besides, Phyllis likes when I walk barefoot, says it helps her calibrate the gravity stabilizers. Phyllis has opinions about your feet? Phyllis has opinions about everything. Haven't you noticed? Owen had noticed, but hearing it confirmed made him feel slightly better about the constant running commentary from their allegedly professional ship management system. He moved to the viewport, watching another asteroid drift past. This one shot through with veins of ice that caught the nebula's light like frozen lightning. We should probably talk about the practical aspects, he said, trying for responsible and landing somewhere near anxious. 3 months left on this mission. Then we go back to Luna Station, file our reports, and presumably get assigned to different projects because the universe has a sense of humor. Presumably. And Vela courtship has protocols we're completely ignoring. Thoroughly ignoring, yes. Naomi came to stand beside him at the viewport. My family would have 17 different ceremonies planned by now. Gift exchanges, compatibility readings, formal presentations to the community elders. Very organized, very traditional. And instead, you got a human with a diary and emotional regulation issues. I got someone who notices things, who pays attention. She bumped her shoulder against his, a casual gesture that felt monumental. I'll take that over ceremony. Owen wanted to believe her, wanted to lean into the simple possibility that this could work despite the logistics and the cultural differences and the fact that they were literally drifting through space in a metal container held together by outdated technology and hope. But his brain, trained for worst-case scenarios and risk assessment, kept cataloging problems. You're thinking too loud, Naomi observed. I can see your doubt spiraling. Just considering variables. Like a proper scientist, very sexy. She was teasing him now, her voice light. What if we just see what happens? No protocols, no spiraling, just existence. We finish the mission. We figure out what comes after when we get there. That's extremely unvela of you. I'm discovering I have a rebellious streak. Probably your bad influence. The asteroid field glittered outside their small window, millions of years old, indifferent to human or Vela concerns, just existing in the dark and cold, because that's what matter did. Owen thought about Naomi reading his diary, about her keeping distance for weeks because she didn't know how to close it, about Phyllis manipulating their schedules with all the subtlety of a malfunctioning thruster. Okay, he said. Okay? Let's just exist, see what happens. Try not to overthink it, which I'll absolutely fail at, but I'll try. Naomi smiled, that expression he'd attempted to capture in words and never quite managed. I'll help. I'm very good at keeping you focused on the present. By breaking into my quarters and confronting me with my own emotional honesty, if necessary, yes. The ship hummed around them, carrying them forward through the mapped and unmapped dark. And Owen thought that maybe chaos wasn't the worst foundation for something new. Maybe clumsy sincerity and stolen moments and an interfering AI were exactly enough to build on. For the record, he said, I'm still keeping the diary, and I'm still keeping the right to read it whenever I want. That's a violation of privacy. You wrote 17 pages about me, Owen. Privacy was already a casualty. She took his hand again, easy and natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. Besides, I want to know what you write next. Probably something about how you're impossible and infuriating, but sincerely impossible. That's the important part. He laughed despite himself, and Naomi's ears tilted forward, pleased. Outside, the universe continued its expansion, indifferent and eternal. Inside, two people who shouldn't have worked on paper were figuring out how to work in practice, one awkward moment at a time. 3 days after what Owen had started mentally categorizing as the diary incident, he found himself in the observation deck at 0400 hours, ostensibly checking the long-range sensor array, but actually just avoiding sleep. Insomnia was a common side effect of extended space travel, something about circadian rhythms getting confused when day and night were arbitrary constructs maintained by artificial lighting. Also, his brain wouldn't stop replaying the feeling of Naomi's hand in his, which was significantly more disruptive than any circadian issue. The door hissed open behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He'd started recognizing her footsteps, the particular rhythm of her bare feet on the deck plating. You're thinking too loud again, Naomi said, settling into the seat beside him. I could hear it from my quarters. That's not how thinking works, isn't it? Your brain generates electrical impulses. I sense electromagnetic fields. Therefore, loud thinking. She pulled her knees up to her chest, a position that should have looked awkward in the standard issue station chair, but somehow didn't. What's spiraling now? Owen gestured at the viewport, where the Helix Nebula dominated the view. Swirls of ionized gas in improbable colors, stellar nurseries where new stars were being born from the compressed remnants of old ones. Just contemplating cosmic insignificance. The usual. At 4 in the morning? Best time for it. Less competition for the existential dread. Naomi reached over and flicked his ear, a gesture so unexpected that Owen actually yelped. She looked entirely too pleased with herself. Stop catastrophizing. We had a nice moment 3 days ago. We've had several nice moments since. The universe hasn't collapsed. Yet, your optimism is inspiring. I'm a scientist. We're trained to expect failure and plan accordingly. He rubbed his ear, which didn't actually hurt, but the gesture felt warranted. Did you just flick me? Your ears don't move, so I had to improvise. Mine would have tilted to show I was listening. Human ears are decorative, not functional. Clearly, very inefficient design. She shifted in her seat, angling to face him more directly. Phyllis said you've been up here every night this week. Want to tell me what's actually wrong? Or should I guess? Owen considered deflecting, then remembered that deflection was what had led to the diary situation in the first place. I'm worried I'm going to mess this up. This being, us, whatever we're doing. The fact that we're attempting interpersonal connection while trapped in a tin can hurtling through space, mapping asteroids for a mining corporation that definitely doesn't care about our feelings. That's very specific worry. I contain multitudes of anxiety. Naomi was quiet for a moment, her eyes reflecting the nebula's light in ways that made her look simultaneously alien and achingly familiar. You know what my people say about new things? The star burns brightest in the moment of fusion. It's about how creation requires pressure and heat and the willingness to become something different. That's beautiful and also mildly terrifying as a relationship metaphor. Most worthwhile things are. She reached for his hand, laced their fingers together with that casual confidence he envied. I'm scared too, Owen. I just hide it better. You marched into my quarters holding evidence of my emotional catastrophe and turned it into a conversation. You're fearless. I'm Vela. We're very good at projecting calm while internally screaming. Cultural trait. Her thumb traced circles on his palm, sending small static charges dancing across his skin. I've been composing messages to my sister for 3 days and deleting them because I don't know how to explain that I'm involved with a human who writes about strawberries like their religious experiences. Owen laughed despite himself. You're never letting that go, are you? Never, it's too endearing. She tilted her head, ears shifting to catch some sound beyond his hearing range. Also, speaking of strawberries, I traded my entire next month's dessert rations for real ones. They're arriving on tomorrow's supply drone. You did what? The supply officer drives a hard bargain. Apparently, actual Earth strawberries are worth their weight in rare minerals out here. She looked absurdly proud of herself. I wanted to see if they lived up to your documentation. Owen felt something warm and alarming unfold in his chest. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Besides, now you have to share them with me, and I can judge whether your poetic observations were accurate or just sleep deprivation. Definitely sleep deprivation. Have you seen my work schedule? I helped Phyllis create your work schedule. It's very efficient. It's tyrannical. Same thing. Naomi squeezed his hand. Point is, I'm making gestures too. Clumsy ones probably. My sister would be horrified at the lack of proper ritual. But I'm trying. The observation deck's lights dimmed slightly. Phyllis's way of suggesting they should probably be sleeping, subtle as a cargo ship to the face. Owen ignored it. Outside, a cluster of asteroids drifted past in formation, their trajectories calculated and predictable, unlike anything happening in his personal life. Can I ask you something? He said. You're going to regardless. What happens when we get back to Luna Station? Realistically, we file our reports, the mission ends, and then what? Naomi was quiet, but not in a concerning way. More like she was actually considering the question instead of offering easy reassurance. I don't know. I've been assigned a navigation post for the last 4 years. Could be anywhere next. You? Same. They send astrophysicists wherever they need readings taken or equipment fixed. He watched the nebula's light play across her features. We could end up on opposite sides of colonized space. We could. That's terrifying. Yes. You're supposed to tell me it'll work out. I'm Vela, not psychic. The future is probability and chaos. She shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his. But I know that 3 months ago, I thought this mission would be routine mapping work with a colleague I'd tolerate. Instead, I got you, with your terrible door codes and emotional honesty, and the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I don't hum. You absolutely hum. Pre-colonial Earth music usually. Phyllis has a whole database. Before he could protest, she continued. Point is, I didn't predict you, didn't plan for you. And here we are anyway at 4 in the morning, holding hands in an observation deck while you catastrophize about the future. And that's good. It's better than good. It's real. She turned to face him fully, her expression serious in the dim light. I can't promise what happens in 3 months, can't promise we won't get assigned to different quadrants, or that this won't get complicated in ways we haven't imagined yet. But I can promise I'm here now, and I want to be here, and that's enough. Owen wanted to argue, wanted to plan and calculate probabilities, and prepare for every possible outcome like his training demanded. But Naomi was looking at him with those impossible eyes, and her hand was warm in his, and the nebula outside was creating new stars from the compressed remains of dead ones, which seemed like a pretty good metaphor for taking chances on improbable things. Okay, he said, just okay. I'm working on being present instead of catastrophizing. It's a process. He squeezed her hand. But yeah. Okay, this is enough. Good, because I didn't trade a month of desserts for nothing. She stood, pulling him up with her. Come on, we have 4 hours before shift starts and you need sleep. I need to finish the sensor calibration. The sensors are fine. You're hiding again. She was right, which was becoming a disturbing pattern. Owen let himself be led toward the door, glancing back once at the observation window where the nebula continued its slow stellar birth, indifferent to human concerns about the future. Naomi. Yes? Thank you for the strawberries, and for being patient with my spiraling. Thank you for writing 17 pages about me and leaving them where I could find them. She smiled, mischievous and genuine. Best accidental confession I've ever read. It's the only confession you've ever read. Semantics, Phyllis chimed in as they entered the corridor. Heart rates normalized. Cortisol levels decreasing. Excellent progress on your interpersonal development. Phyllis, they said in unison. Just documenting for the record. Sleep well, you two. Tomorrow's supply drone arrives at 1200 hours. The strawberries will need immediate refrigeration. The AI sounded smug again, but Owen found he didn't mind as much. Maybe having an interfering ship management system wasn't the worst thing. Maybe chaos and chance and stolen moments in observation decks were enough to build something real on. They walked back through the quiet ship together, hands linked, while outside the universe continued its expansion, and inside something new took shape between the predictable orbits. The supply drone arrived exactly on schedule, which was suspicious in itself because nothing in deep space ran exactly on schedule. Owen watched through the cargo bay's observation window as the automated vessel docked with practiced precision, its mechanical arms extending to transfer crates of supplies, replacement parts, and apparently one container of contraband fresh fruit. You're staring at a drone like it personally wronged you, Naomi said, appearing at his elbow with 2 cups of coffee. She'd started bringing him coffee, which he suspected was retaliation for his earlier cinnamon gesture, except she was better at it because she actually remembered he liked it slightly bitter. I'm staring at a drone that's carrying evidence of your questionable financial decisions. They're strawberries, not weapons-grade plutonium. You traded a month of desserts. A month, Naomi. That's 30 days of synthetic ice cream you'll never get back. Technically 28. It's a short month on the station calendar. She took a sip of her coffee, looking entirely unrepentant. Besides, I want to see if your diary entries were accurate or just poetic exaggeration. What if they were exaggeration? Then I've wasted desserts and you've wasted pages, and we're even. The drone completed its transfer sequence and detached, its thrusters firing in brief bursts as it maneuvered away from the parallax. Owen pulled up the cargo manifest on his tablet, scrolling through the usual supplies, water recycler filters, protein ration packs, replacement circuits for the environmental systems, until he found it. One temperature-controlled container, contents listed as perishable organics, flagged for immediate retrieval. That's them, Naomi said, reading over his shoulder. Cargo Section 7, Lower Bay. This is ridiculous. We're adults on a professional research mission. We're adults on a professional research mission who are about to eat real strawberries in deep space because I wanted to verify your fruit documentation. Yes. She grabbed his hand. Come on before Phyllis assigns someone else to cargo duty. They made their way down to the lower bay, passing crew quarters and the med station, both empty because gamma shift meant skeleton crew, which meant mostly just them and Phyllis keeping the ship running. The cargo bay doors hissed open to reveal stacks of supply crates, all stamped with corporate logos and inventory codes. Section 7, Owen muttered, checking his tablet, should be there. The temperature-controlled container was smaller than he'd expected, about the size of a shoebox, with a small digital display showing internal temperature holding steady at 4 degrees Celsius. Naomi picked it up with the reverence usually reserved for volatile chemicals. Should we open it here, or? Absolutely not. Phyllis has cameras everywhere. She'll give us commentary. I have audio sensors too, Phyllis interjected helpfully. And yes, I would definitely provide commentary. It's part of my charm. Your charm is debatable, Owen said, already heading toward the exit with Naomi close behind, clutching the container like it held precious gems instead of fruit. They ended up back in Owen's quarters because it was closer and because Naomi claimed his chairs were more comfortable, which was objectively untrue, but he wasn't going to argue. She set the container on his desk, carefully opened the clasp, and lifted the lid. The smell hit first, sweet and green and alive in a way that synthetic rations never managed. Inside, nestled in protective foam, were actual strawberries. Real ones, grown in lunar greenhouses under carefully calibrated light, shipped across space at considerable expense, because someone had decided that crew morale was worth the logistics. Oh, Naomi said softly. Yeah. She picked one up, turning it in her fingers. The fruit was almost absurdly red against her violet skin, small and imperfect in the way real things always were. Owen watched her examine it with the same focused attention she gave to navigation calculations. You're supposed to eat it, not analyze it. I'm appreciating the moment. Your diary said I close my eyes on the first bite of anything sweet. She looked at him, one ear tilting playfully. I want to know if you were paying attention or just guessing. Rigorous scientific observation. Stalking. Documentation. She smiled and bit into the strawberry, and yes, her eyes closed. Just for a second, but enough that Owen felt vindicated in his previous observations. When she opened them again, her expression had shifted into something he didn't have words for yet. Well, he asked. Your documentation was inadequate. I used 4 pages. Should have used 8. She picked up another strawberry and held it out to him. Your turn. Owen took it, bit down, and was immediately transported back to Earth summers he barely remembered. Childhood visits to his grandmother's garden, the taste of sun-warmed fruit picked directly from the plant, back when strawberries were just strawberries and not symbols of complicated feelings in space. Good? Naomi asked. Dangerous. Now I remember what I'm missing out here. We're all missing something out here. That's why we leave. She picked up another strawberry, studying it like it held secrets. My sister makes these into preserves. Traditional Vela recipe, except with earth fruit. Very scandalous cross-cultural cooking. Your family sounds interesting. They're horrified by me. Youngest daughter supposed to marry into a nice traditional family. Instead, I'm navigating research vessels and eating contraband fruit with a human who writes diaries. She popped the strawberry in her mouth, chewed thoughtfully. They'd like you, though. My sister especially. She appreciates romantic gestures. Owen felt that warm, alarming sensation in his chest again. This is a romantic gesture? I thought you bought these to mock my documentation skills. Can it be both? Naomi set the container between them on the desk, and they sat there eating strawberries in comfortable silence while the ship hummed around them and the universe expanded indifferently outside. After a while, she said, I wrote to my sister yesterday, actually sent it this time instead of deleting. What did you tell her? That I met someone who notices things, who pays attention to small details and writes them down because that's how he processes feelings, that he's human and chaotic and completely different from anyone I'd normally be interested in. She reached for his hand, fingers sticky with strawberry juice. That I think I might be in love with him, which is terrifying and probably too soon to say, but Vela don't believe in hiding truth. Owen's brain performed several emergency stops in rapid succession. You... what? I think I might be in love with you. Might. Still gathering data. She looked nervous for the first time since entering his quarters with his diary, her color shifting to deeper violet. Is that too human of me? Too direct? No, that's... He stopped, tried again. I wrote 17 pages about you before I even admitted to myself what I was feeling. So you're actually way ahead on the emotional honesty curve. Is that a yes? That's a, I'm completely terrified and also pretty sure I feel the same way, but my brain is currently experiencing a cascade failure. Naomi laughed, that sound he'd never adequately captured, and kissed him. It was quick and tasted like strawberries and felt like the universe rearranging itself into new configurations. When she pulled back, she was smiling. There, now we're both terrified together. Much better. Is it? Absolutely. Shared terror is the foundation of all good relationships. I don't think that's true. Prove it. Owen kissed her again, longer this time, and decided that maybe she had a point. Maybe terror and strawberries and improbable connections in deep space were exactly the right foundation for something real. Phyllis chimed in, sounding almost gentle. For the record, I approve of this development. You're both significantly less stressed when together. Phyllis, Owen said without pulling away from Naomi, this is absolutely not the time. Noted. I'll just update the relationship status file to terrified but committed. Naomi burst out laughing against his shoulder, and Owen decided that having an interfering AI wasn't the worst thing after all. The strawberry sat forgotten on the desk, half-eaten evidence of ridiculous gestures and emotional honesty, while two people from different worlds figured out what came after. I think I might be in love with you. Outside, the nebula continued creating stars from cosmic debris. Inside, something just as improbable took shape in a cramped cabin full of navigation equipment, coffee cups, and one very worn diary that had started everything. 2 months and 3 weeks after the diary incident, a timeline Owen had stopped pretending he wasn't tracking, the parallax completed its final mapping sweep of the Helix Nebula's outer asteroid belt. The data was comprehensive, the mission successful by every measurable metric, and in approximately 6 hours, they'd begin the 3-week journey back to Luna Station, where everything would become complicated in entirely new ways. Owen stood in the observation deck watching the nebula recede, trying to memorize the exact shade of ionized gas against the dark, when Naomi found him. She'd developed an uncanny ability to locate him whenever his thoughts spiraled, which was both comforting and slightly unnerving. You're catastrophizing again, she said, settling beside him with the easy familiarity they developed over weeks of stolen moments and shared meals, and nights spent talking until Gamma Shift became Alpha Shift. I can tell because you get this specific expression, like you're calculating the trajectory of your own emotional collapse. That's very specific. I've been studying you, taking notes even. She pulled out a small tablet and made a show of reading from it. Subject exhibits chronic anxiety about future outcomes. Coping mechanism includes hiding in observation deck and staring at space. Prone to humming when distressed. Current status, definitely humming. Owen hadn't realized he was humming. Are you seriously keeping documentation on me now? Turnabout is fair play. Also, I find you fascinating. She tucked the tablet away. Want to tell me what's wrong, or should I keep guessing? We dock at Luna Station in 72 hours. Then we file reports, attend debriefings, and presumably discover that the universe has assigned us to opposite ends of colonized space because it has a sense of dramatic irony. Very probably, yes. You're supposed to be reassuring. I'm Vela. We don't do false comfort. She took his hand, threading their fingers together with the casual intimacy that still made his heart perform complicated acrobatics. But I did request my next assignment. Owen turned to face her fully. You what? Sent the request 3 days ago. Asked for navigation posting on long-term survey missions, specifically anything requiring astrophysics support. Her ears tilted forward, pleased with herself. Figured I'd improve my odds of working with a particular human who writes excessively detailed observational journals. You can't just request assignments based on personal relationships. There are protocols, career implications, all of which I considered before filing the paperwork. She squeezed his hand. What about you? Still planning to let the assignment board scatter us randomly across the solar system? He'd planned exactly that, actually, because planning felt safer than hoping. But looking at Naomi now, her violet skin catching the nebula's fading light, her expression open and certain in ways he envied, Owen realized that safety had stopped being the priority somewhere between the diary and the strawberries and the moment she'd said she might be in love with him. I might have also filed a request, he admitted. Survey work, long-term postings, specifically asked for teams requiring both astrophysics and navigation expertise. Naomi's smile could have powered the ship's engines. So we're both terrible at playing it safe. Comprehensively terrible. Phyllis, Naomi called out, what are the odds we get assigned together? The AI's response came immediately, almost smug. Based on current crew shortage and survey divisions, your combined expertise, and the fact that I may have flagged your files as a high compatibility team in the assignment database, I'd estimate 73% probability. Owen stared at the ceiling speaker. You manipulated our assignment files? I optimized team performance metrics based on observational data, completely within my operational parameters. Phyllis somehow managed to sound both professional and entirely unrepentant. You're welcome. We didn't thank you. You were thinking it. Naomi laughed, and Owen couldn't help joining her, because the absurdity of having their careers managed by an interfering AI was somehow perfectly appropriate for how this entire situation had developed. Chaotic, improbable, and against every protocol he'd ever learned. So, Naomi said once they'd recovered, 73% odds. Not guaranteed, but not terrible. And if we're in the 27%, then we figure it out. Send messages, request transfers, make it work however we can. She turned to face the viewport, pulling him close enough that he could feel the warmth of her against his side. I didn't trade desserts and file paperwork and fall in love with you just to give up because of logistics. You're really committing to the love thing now? No more might be? Gathered enough data. Conclusion is definitive. She looked at him sideways, ears tilting playfully. Problem? No problem, just terrified. Good, me too. Shared terror, remember? She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. Besides, even if we end up on different assignments initially, I'm patient. I navigated us through an asteroid field for 6 months without hitting anything. I can navigate us through bureaucracy. Owen thought about the past 3 months, the diary that had started everything, the conversations and observation decks at impossible hours. Naomi's hand in his while Phyllis provided unwanted commentary, strawberries eaten in his quarters while the universe expanded outside. He thought about being terrified and doing things anyway, about improbable connections forming in the dark between stars. I wrote about you again, he said quietly. Last night, about how you showed me the electromagnetic map of the nebula, the way you see it through your neurology. All those invisible fields and currents I can only measure with instruments, but you feel them like breathing. Was it excessively detailed? 4 pages. Good, I expect nothing less. She straightened, pulling him toward the exit. Come on, we have 6 hours before departure, and I want to spend them not catastrophizing about the future. What did you have in mind? Thought we'd raid the last of the strawberries, watch terrible old Earth movies in the rec room, and let Phyllis judge our taste in entertainment. She paused. Unless you'd rather hide up here and spiral about assignment probabilities? The strawberries sound better. They walked through the parallax familiar corridors, hand in hand, past the engine room where Naomi had spent countless hours, past Owen's quarters where everything had started with a diary and mortification. The ship hummed around them, preparing for the journey home, indifferent to human concerns about what came next. In the rec room, they found the last container of strawberries, slightly past peak freshness, but still better than anything synthetic, and queued up a film from Earth's 20th century that Phyllis immediately criticized for scientific inaccuracy. Naomi sat close enough that Owen could feel her bioelectric field dancing across his skin, her head resting on his shoulder while the movie played, and Phyllis provided running commentary about impossible physics. This is nice, Naomi said during a particularly egregious explosion scene. Phyllis criticizing our entertainment choices? Being here, with you, not thinking about what happens in 72 hours. She tilted her head to look at him. We're going to be okay, you know. whatever happens. Owen wanted to calculate probabilities, plan contingencies, prepare for every possible outcome. Instead, he kissed her, tasting strawberries and certainty, and decided that maybe Naomi was right. Maybe they'd figure it out through bureaucracy and distance and whatever chaos the universe threw at them next. "Yeah," he said, "we'll be okay." Phyllis dimmed the lights slightly, her version of discretion, and the movie continued playing while two people from different worlds sat together in a recreation room aboard a 40-year-old research vessel, not solving the future but existing in the present, which turned out to be enough. Outside, the Helix Nebula faded into the distance, its stellar nurseries continuing their slow work of creation. Inside, something that had started with accidental honesty and terrible timing had grown into something real, messy and improbable, and built on shared terror and strawberries and the willingness to try anyway. The parallax carried them forward through the map dark toward whatever came next, its hull humming with life support and hope, while Owen and Naomi sat together and didn't catastrophize about the future, just for a little while. And that, against all odds and protocols and reasonable expectations, felt exactly right. The end. And so Owen and Naomi's story comes to a close, not with certainty about the future, but with the courage to face it together. Sometimes the most important discoveries we make aren't mapped in star charts or documented in mission reports. Sometimes they're found in stolen moments, shared strawberries, and the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone see who we really are. What would you do if you were in Owen's position? Would you have kept your feelings hidden, professional and safe behind walls of protocol? Or would you take the risk, knowing that honesty might lead to connection, or catastrophic awkwardness, trapped in a tin can hurtling through space? And if you were Naomi, would you have confronted Owen with his diary, or quietly pretended you'd never seen those 17 pages of documented longing? These questions matter because love, whether between humans, aliens, or any combination thereof, always requires us to choose between safety and possibility, to decide whether we'll let fear write our stories or whether we'll grab the pen ourselves and see what happens when we're brave enough to be honest. Here at Sci-Fi Pulse, we believe the best science fiction doesn't just take us to distant worlds. It shows us truths about ourselves reflected in starlight and alien eyes. If this story resonated with you, if you found yourself rooting for Owen and Naomi, or if you just enjoyed watching an interfering AI play matchmaker, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of cosmic romantics and space dreamers. Drop a comment below telling us what you do in their situation, or share your favorite moment from the story. Would you have eaten the strawberries? Would you have kept the diary? We want to hear from you. And don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed this journey through the Helix Nebula and into the complicated territory of interspecies relationships. The universe is vast, full of infinite stories waiting to be told, stories of first contact and last chances, of humans and aliens navigating the space between what they are and what they might become together. Stay tuned for our next story, where we'll explore new worlds, new complications, and new ways that connection finds us even in the deepest dark.